So I had Dr. Tom on. Love Dr. Tom. He told me about training in the warehouse. It's one thing to learn how to lock up. It's one thing to learn how to take a bump. Mark, who taught you the actual wrestling business? Who taught you how to work in the ring?
You know what? Tom started and did a good job with the foundation.
Hmm.
And then I got sent to Canada and I started training with Leo Burke, Hall of Fame coach, one of the Canada's best, one of the guys that Stu Hart trusted to work with Brett and Owen and hundreds of other wrestlers in the Maritimes and Bad News Brown and yada, yada, yada. And I befriended Stu Hart because he asked me did I know how to fight. That I reminded him of guy he used to hang out with named Luther Lindsay, and he said, "Man, that Luther he could really fight." And I said, I've had fights before, but I never had no competitions." And he said, "Well, if you want to learn, come by the dungeon." And there will be days where I would go over there and roll around and start learning how to do takedowns and how to do real joint manipulation and wrist locks and headlocks. And um, Stu was explaining that now that you know how to shoot, then you can do the work. And it was like a light switch went off. Like I understood what I was doing and
Right.
why I was doing it. And working with Leo, who was a hard nosed coach, I improved real fast. And then I went to Ohio Valley Wrestling, and I was there with Rip Rogers and Danny Davis, and they finished the job. And it was like being broke in 3 times. And during that time, I did those funkin' dojos with Dory Funk
Hmm.
and another Hall of Fame coach. And so it was just like I was meant to know to learn what I learned because of the coaches that I had. Um, Jim Cornette was the guy that um, instilled know the history and go study wrestling and know where wrestling came from. And I started reading back. My interest was current, but I had to go back to the early 1900s. Um, the introduction of the first African American wrestler um, that was a slave, and all the way up to Jim Mitchell, who in '44 was the original Black Panther and really the guy that broke the color barrier. History said Bobo Brazil did it, but Bobo did it after Jim Mitchell. And just knowing that history of where you came from and where your place was, um, and being behind people like Ron Simmons, man, it just made me want to be better. And I ended up with the thirst, not. I kind of sound like Blade, like I ain't end up with a bloodthirst, but I ended up with a wrestling knowledge thirst. Like I wanted to know why.
Right.
Why is this? And they go, oh, just do it. No, no, no. Don't just tell me to do it. Tell me why. I know. I mean, how I can learn how, but why you do it, and when is the best time to do it, and then once you really know, where do you slide that in? Like, so I started learning the history and the fine tuning of it. Um, I'm on a show called Busted Open, and I used to call in all the time and talk to Dave LaGreca uh, when him um, um, when he was doing the satellite TV show or radio show. and him and Doug Mortman. And I would call in. They like, is this Mark Henry for real? Or come on, like, don't bullshit us. I said, no, this is me for real. I was like, but y'all are talking about stuff, and that's not the way it happened. And it started to be like, I didn't want to educate the world on what the way that it was, the way the sausage was really made, but I also didn't want them to be on live radio telling people stuff that wasn't true, that wasn't the really reason why. And they were never dirt sheet guys. So they weren't talking gossip and all of that stuff. They were talking wrestling.
Right.
And I loved it. And I called in. I was the first caller on Sirius XM. I was meant to be a host, because that was like, what I did when I used to drive those long ass drives after the show. I had to try to stay awake. And when I found a satellite channel with wrestling on it, I was like, shit, I'm good. I stay awake now. And I would call in and go, that's not the way it happened, guys. And, and Dave would be like, man, like it would be so cool to be able to talk to you and have this happen. And I said, well, the next time you come to a show in Texas, call me. And he did. He came to WrestleMania, and I told him, I was like, man, I think in a year or so I might retire. I'm tired being on the road. And he was like, when you retire, the day you retire, call me. He said, because I want you to come on Busted Open and like, be a host. And that's how it happened.